Good day, Deep and Word family. Welcome to day 148 of our Bible study review. Today we're going through chapters 36 through 38 of the book of Jeremiah. As we open up chapter 36, we will see that now this time is recording a previous time when Jehoiakim was king. Now, right now, Zedekiah is on the throne, but it's going back to tell a story of Jehoiakim and Jehoiakim's apostasy and how he would not hearken to the voice of Yahweh through the prophet Jeremiah. So let's start reading from verse 1 and see how this story plays out in chapter 36. So it says right here in verse 1, in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, this word came to Jeremiah from Yahweh saying, take a scroll of a book and write in it all of the words that I have spoken to you against Israel and Judah and against all of the nations from the day that I spoke to you from the days of Josiah even till this day. So Josiah was a righteous king and Jehoiakim is one of his sons, but Jehoiakim is an evil king. All right. And this is recorded back in 2 Kings. All right. It does tell you that he's an evil king and he does not last long. All right, so let's keep reading from verse 3. It says, it may be that the house of Judah will hear of all of the disaster which I intend to do to them, so that every man may turn from his evil way. Then I will forgive their iniquity and their sin. So this is going back again to that time when Jehoiakim was king, right? And Yahweh, he was very merciful. He was like, look, speak this word in their hearing, right? Write it down. And we're going to see the process of this. But he's like, I'm doing this so that they might turn away, right? So that this disaster does not have to happen to them. But then we see that this is not the case, okay? So let's keep reading in verse 4. Then Jeremiah called Baruch, the son of Neriah, and Baruch wrote in a scroll at the dictation of Jeremiah all of the words that Yahweh had spoken to him. Jeremiah commanded Baruch, saying, I am shut in. I cannot go into the house of Yahweh. All right. So at this time, Jeremiah was banned from going into the temple and speaking his words because Jeremiah was not speaking favorable words, right? Words that tickled their ears, right? And so the king banned him from going into the temple and further speaking. But if you don't know, now you know. Yahweh will always have someone to witness and testify concerning his testimonies, concerning his words and his righteousness and his laws, his right rulings. So let's see how this further plays out because Baruch is now commissioned to go and speak these words from the scroll, right? Baruch is the scribe of Jeremiah, and he is told to go forth and do this favor on behalf of Jeremiah since Jeremiah is banned. So let's see how this plays out. Verse 6, therefore, go and read from the scroll that you have written at my dictation the words of Yahweh and the hearing of the people in the house of Yahweh on a fast day. And also you shall read them in the ears of all of Judah who come out of their cities. Perhaps their supplication will come before Yahweh, and everyone will turn from his evil way. For great is the anger and the fury of Yahweh that was pronounced against this people. Verse 8, let's keep going. Baruch, the son of Neriah, did according to all that Jeremiah the prophet commanded him, reading the book of the words of Yahweh in the house of Yahweh. In the 5th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, in the 9th month, they proclaimed a fast before Yahweh. So this is the time that Baruch is going to go because when people are fasting, right, they're not eating and they're seeking the voice of Yahweh. And that's why Jeremiah said, do this during the time where they proclaim a fast, that maybe they will hear with their spiritual ears the true voice that is in the earth, the voice of Yahweh through his prophet. Okay. And so it says right here, all of the people in Jerusalem and all of the people who came from the cities of Judah to Jerusalem. This is the time when Baruch is supposed to do this favor. And it says, verse 10, then Baruch read from the book of the words of Jeremiah in the house of Yahweh in the chamber of Gemariah. And it says, at the entry of the new gate in the house of Yahweh in the ears of all of the people. So then Micaiah, he goes and he speaks these words that Baruch has spoken, right? He speaks it to all of the scribes and to all of the king's officials. Verse 13, let's read. Then Micaiah declared to them all of the words that he had heard when Baruch read the book in the ears of the people. Then the official sent Yehudi to Baruch, saying, take in your hand the scroll from which you have read in the ears of the people, and come. So Baruch the son of Neriah took the scroll in his hand and came to them. And they said to him, sit down now and read it in our ears. So now they want to hear it from the source. They heard it secondhand, but they're like, nah, we want to hear it from the source. So Baruch read it in their ears. When they heard all of the words, they turned to one another in fear. And they said to Baruch, we will surely tell the king of all of these words. They also asked Baruch, saying, tell us now, how did you write all of these words? Was it at his mouth? And then Baruch answered them, he pronounced all these words to me with his mouth, and I wrote them with ink in a book. Then the official said to Baruch, go hide, you and Jeremiah, and let no man know where you are. So Baruch did just that. Baruch went and hid, and he told Jeremiah, look, let's go hide. And then the king's officials and the scribes went to the king's chamber, and in his chamber he had a fire going, and so they were repeating the words to the king, right? And then the king had had enough, and he said, bring the scroll here. And so they brought the scroll, and they started reading directly from the scroll. And as they were reading, Jehoiakim would take the scroll knife, and he was cutting up the scroll and throwing it in the fire, right? And there were a few who were discouraging him from doing this, but all of the other officials that were around King Jehoiakim, they feared not because of the way they saw the king acting. So they were not regarding the words of Yahuwah whatsoever. Let's read from verse 26. But the king commanded Yeramel and Shelemiah to seize Baruch the scribe and Jeremiah the prophet, but Yahuwah hid them. All right. Yahuwah is not allowing for his life to be destroyed. He is hidden in a secret place and they cannot find him. And now let's hear the conclusion of this story right here from verse 27. Then the word of Yahuwah came to Jeremiah after the king had burned the book of the words which Baruch had written at the mouth of Jeremiah, saying, take again another scroll and write in it all of the former words that were in the first book, which Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, has burned. You shall say to Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, thus says Yahuwah, you have burned this book, saying, why have you written in it that the king of Babylon will certainly come and destroy this land and will cause man and beast to cease from here? Therefore, thus says Yahuwah concerning Jehoiakim, king of Judah, he shall have no one to sit on the throne of David. All right, Deep in Word family, I made a little chart of King Josiah and all of his sons and those who reigned, the last kings in Judah before the Babylonian exile. So the king that we're talking about right now is the son of Josiah, which is Jehoiakim. All right, now Jehoiakim, he's the one who burned the scroll of Jeremiah, right? And this is what Yah pronounced against him. He said, your seed will no longer have a place on the throne of David. So after he died, because he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, he died, and his son Jehoiachin, which his original name is Jeconiah, he's the one who reigned in his place, but he only reigned for 3 months. Now, if you trail back to 2 Kings with me, you will see that Jehoiachin or Jeconiah, he only reigned for 3 months before he was exiled off to Babylon. Let's read it. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem for 3 months. And it says that he did evil in the sight of Yahuwah according to all that his father had done. And if you go down, right, it says the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign, in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. We're still in 2 Kings, y'all. So let's read. Let's go down to verse 14. It says, he exiled all of Jerusalem, all of the princes, all of the mighty men of valor, 10,000 captives, and all of the craftsmen and smiths. No one remained except the poorest of the people in the land. So Nebuchadnezzar took all of the royal bloodlines, all of the smart men, and then we'll see more of that in the book of Daniel. But let's go down, and it says right here, the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, the uncle of Jehoiachin, king in place, and he changed his name to Zedekiah. So Zedekiah is the uncle of Jehoiachin. him, right? So Coniah was the next brother in line to take the throne, but Yah said that no more of his sons would take the throne. So instead, his uncle, Mattaniah, who king Babylon changed his name to Zedekiah, became king instead. All right, I'm going to jump back to our reading for today inside of Jeremiah chapter 36. But if you wanted to screenshot this so that it makes a little more sense to you, so you can keep up with this reading, please feel free to screenshot this. Now we're going to get back to the reading. Now let's jump back into the reading. I just wanted to show you that in case your mind was like, what is going on here? All right. It was very difficult for me the first couple of times, but I was like, let me help my brothers and sisters out by making a chart so you can keep up. All right. Now let's get back to verse 30 in the middle of it. And it says, and his body shall be cast out to the heat of the day and the frost of the night. I will also punish him and his seed and his servants for their iniquity. And I will bring upon them and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem and upon all of the men of Judah all of the disaster that I have pronounced against them. But they did not listen. Then Jeremiah took another scroll and gave it to Baruch the scribe, the son of Neriah, who wrote it from the mouth of Jeremiah, all of the words of the book which Jehoiakim the king of Judah had burned in the fire, and there were added to them many like words. So when I tell you the word of Yah ain't stopping for nobody, a second scroll was created so that this would be a hard copy to testify against those who would not hearken to the voice of Yah. So now let's get into chapter 37, now that we know where we are and who is who in the bloodline of Josiah, okay? So it says right here in verse 1, and King Zedekiah, son of Josiah, reigned instead of Coniah, the son of Jehoiakim, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, made king in the land. But neither he nor his servants nor the people of the land listened to the words of Yahweh, which he spoke through the prophet Jeremiah. So Zedekiah was not listening either. But let's see that Zedekiah is not all the way terrible. Zedekiah is the one who, set out in the land a proclamation of a Jubilee year, but the people wouldn't hearken. So he's not all the way terrible, but altogether he is not listening as a whole to the voice of Yahweh. All right, so let's see in verse 3 what happens. It says, but Zedekiah, the king, sent Jehukal, the priest, to the prophet Jeremiah, saying, please pray to Yahweh our Elohim for us. Now Jeremiah was still coming in and going out among the people, for they had not yet put him into prison, right? If you remember from yesterday's reading, Jeremiah was imprisoned from King Zedekiah, all right? Now let's keep reading. Verse 5, at that time, Pharaoh's army had come out of Egypt, and when the Chaldeans who were besieging Jerusalem heard the report of them, they departed from Jerusalem, right? We know that the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the kings of Jerusalem, were making political alliances with Egypt, with Pharaoh, and they were paying him tribute to help them fight against their enemies. And one of their enemies was Babylon, the Chaldeans, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. But this gives the inhabitants of Jerusalem, right? And the king at the time, Zedekiah, false hope, right? Because they see Nebuchadnezzar retreating. So they're like, oh, Yahweh is saving us, right? And that's not the case. Let's keep reading. Verse 6. Then the word of Yahweh came to the prophet Jeremiah, saying, thus says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, thus you shall say to the king of Judah, who sent you to me to inquire of me, Pharaoh's army, which has come out to help you, shall return to Egypt, to its own land. The Chaldeans will come again, and they will fight against this city and take it and burn it with fire. So he's saying, please do not be relieved, not for 1 second, because Nebuchadnezzar's coming back. He's going to finish what I put in him to finish. Let's keep reading. Verse 9. Thus says Yahweh, do not deceive yourselves, saying, the Chaldeans will surely depart from us, for they will not depart. For though you had struck the whole army of the Chaldeans who fight against you, and there remained but wounded men among them, yet every man would rise up in his tent and burn the city with fire. He goes, even if you did defeat them, he says they would rise up again and come back and burn the city. He goes, no matter what, Do not take comfort in what you see at this moment in time. They are coming back and they are going to burn the city. Why? Because this is your punishment. You desecrated my holy place and my holy name, and I have to cleanse the land, and I'm going to do it by the king of Nebuchadnezzar. He's going to come through and he's going to purify this land that you have done all of your abominations in. Let's keep reading. Verse 11. Now, when the army of the Chaldeans had withdrawn from Jerusalem at the approach of Pharaoh's army, Jeremiah set out from Jerusalem to go into the land of Benjamin to take possession of his property there among the people. If you remember our reading yesterday, right? This is what Yahweh was doing for Jeremiah. He was allowing him to purchase a plot of land while the rest of them were taken away in the Babylonian exile, right? He was showing his favor while he was, locked up in the king's prison court, that he was able to still purchase land while being locked up. He was showing and approving his prophet. Let's keep reading in verse 13. When he was at the gate of Benjamin, right? So every city with every tribe, they had a gate as you entered into the city. And there was a captain guard. And that captain guard seized Jeremiah. And he said, you are falling away to the Chaldeans. He's like, you are a traitor, right? You are not for Jerusalem. You actually are for this exile to Babylon. And Jeremiah says this in verse 14. It is false. I am not falling away to the Chaldeans, but he did not listen to him. So it says that he seized him and brought him before the officials. Therefore, the officials were wrathful with Jeremiah and struck him and put him in prison in the house of Jonathan the scribe, for they had made that the prison. For Jeremiah had entered the dungeon, that is, the vaulted cell, and Jeremiah had remained there many days. Then Zedekiah the king sent and took him out, and the king asked him secretly in his house and said, is there any word from Yahweh? And Jeremiah said, there is. Then he said, you shall be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon. So even though Jeremiah is, being locked up and he's being persecuted, King Zedekiah is coming and he's like, look, do you have a good word? And Jeremiah is like, yeah, you're going to be taken to Babylon. Let's keep reading, y'all. Verse 18. Moreover, Jeremiah said to King Zedekiah, how have I sinned against you or against your servants or against this people that you have put me in prison? Where now are your prophets who prophesied to you, saying, the king of Babylon will not come against you nor against this land? Therefore now, please listen, O my lord the king. Please let my supplication be accepted before you, that you not cause me to return to the house of Jonathan the scribe, lest I die there. Then King Zedekiah commanded that they should commit Jeremiah into the court of the prison and give him a daily piece of bread out of the baker's street until all of the bread in the city was finished. Thus Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison. So at that point, Zedekiah was somewhat merciful to Jeremiah, but he still didn't like the words that he spoke towards him, right? Jeremiah, much like you can say John the Baptist, is not scared of earthly kings. He is going to speak the word of the true king on the true throne of the everlasting throne and the true tabernacle in heaven. He's like, I'm going to speak this true word to you. And he said, well, where are your other prophets, right? The ones who you like to hear. The fact that they said that the king of Babylon is not coming, and yet you see this place is becoming a desolation. All of the riches are being stripped. The word of Yahweh is being performed before your eyes. So Jeremiah is essentially saying, I'm not for you, and I'm not for the king of Babylon. I'm for the one true king, and I'm going to speak whatever he tells me to speak to you. And I want you to see that every word that he speaks does not fall to the ground. Look around, sir. Now let's walk into chapter 38. Now, Shephatiah heard the words that Jeremiah had spoken to all of the people, saying, thus says Yahweh, he who remains in this city will die by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence. But he who goes out to the Chaldeans shall live, for he shall have his life as a prize unto him, and he shall live. Thus says Yahweh, the city shall surely be given into the hand of the king of Babylon's army, and he will capture it. Verse 4, therefore the officials said to the king, we beseech you, let this man be put to death, for thus he weakens the hands of the men of war who remain in the city and the hands of the people in speaking such words to them. For this man does not seek the welfare of this people, but their harms. So all of the officials, right, they're coming up to the king and they're saying, let this man be put to death. And Zedekiah says, well, I place him in your hands. And it just reminds me of Pilate, right, with our Messiah, when the Pharisees, right, and the Sadducees brought Messiah before him and they said, he's guilty, he's guilty. And at a certain point, he washed his hands. He was like, he brought out a murderer. He brought out a crazy man. And then he brought out Messiah and he says, which one do you want released to you? And they wanted the murderer released to them. And then after that, Pilate, he dipped his hands in water and washed his hands of the matter. And this is what Zedekiah is looking like right now. Verse 6, then they took Jeremiah and cast him into the cistern. And it says that he was in the court of prison, and they let Jeremiah down with cords. And in the cistern there was no water, only mud. So Jeremiah was sinking in the mud. Now, Ebed-Melech the Ethiopian, one of the eunuchs who was in the king's house, heard that they had put Jeremiah in the cistern. Now the king was sitting in the gate of Benjamin. Ebed-Melech went forth out of the king's house and spoke to the king, saying, my lord, the king, these men have done evil, and all that they have done to Jeremiah the prophet, whom they have cast into the cistern, and he will die by hunger in that place where he is, for there is no more bread in the city. You have to stop and pause and think, this is the time when Jerusalem is being overturned by the king of Babylon. And what do other kingdoms do when they're taking over territory? They first strip them of all of their food supplies, right? They make it hard for them to survive. They starve them out. And so the only man who has a heart to help Jeremiah, because Jeremiah is in this cistern, there's no water, there's no bread, he's starving at this point, and the only one that wants to help him is an Ethiopian man. Now, I know it's up for debate, but I believe it was also an Ethiopian man who carried the cross of our Messiah. There's something special about Ethiopians in the word of Yah. These are special people who love Yah and who love his word. And yes, there are many Ethiopian Yahudim, Ethiopian Jews. But let's keep reading and let's see how this Ethiopian is fighting for Jeremiah. And so the king commanded him, saying, take 30 men with you from here and take up Jeremiah the prophet out of the cistern before he dies. So now Zedekiah feels bad about, letting the people do whatever they want to do with Jeremiah. But it's only because this one man is testifying and standing up for Jeremiah, all right? And it says, so Ebed-Melech took the men under his authority and went into the house of the king under the storeroom and took from there the worn out clothes, and then they made like a rope to bring Jeremiah out of the cistern. Then Zedekiah sent for Jeremiah to come in his courts, actually come to the house of Yahuwah, which he was previously banned from walking into the temple. But now he's walking into the temple, and there is the king, King Zedekiah. And King Zedekiah says to Jeremiah, he goes, look, I will ask you something, and I don't want you to hold back whatsoever. And Jeremiah responds, and he says, look, if I tell you and hold nothing back, he goes, you will put my life to an end. But Zedekiah promises not to do so to Jeremiah. So now let's pick up at verse 17. It says, then Jeremiah said to Zedekiah, thus says Yahuwah the Elohim of Israel, if you will surrender to the officers of the king of Babylon, then your soul will live, and the city will not be burned with fire. Thus you and your household will live. But if you do not surrender to the king of Babylon's officials, then the city will be given into the hand of the Chaldeans, and they will burn it with fire, and you will not escape out of their hands. Then Zedekiah the king said to Jeremiah, I am afraid of the Jews who have fallen over to the Chaldeans, lest they deliver me into their hands and mock me. Then Jeremiah proceeds to tell him, he goes, look, they will not mock you. They will not deliver you up. If you just surrender to this plan, he says, all will be well with you and your soul. And he begs of him, he goes, please obey these words so that you are not destroyed. All right. And then we go over to verse 24, and it says, then Zedekiah said to Jeremiah, let no man know of these words, and you will not die. But if the officials hear that I have talked with you and they have come to you to say to you, declare to us now what you said to the king and what the king said to you. Do not hide it from us, and we will not put you to death. Then you shall say to them, I presented my supplication before the king that he would not cause me to return to the house of Jonathan to die there. So Jeremiah is to tell the officials, right, who cannot stand him, that the only reason why he went to the king is to beg not to go back to the house of Jonathan where he was, stuck in a cistern. So that is exactly what happened when Jeremiah was leaving the temple. The officials saw Jeremiah, and then they inquired of him, why are you here? And what words did you speak to the king? And so Jeremiah said exactly what Zedekiah told him to say to them. And then they left him alone because they did not overhear what they were saying with one another. And so Jeremiah remained in the prison court of Zedekiah until all of Jerusalem was captured by the king of Babylon. Let Jeremiah's life testify to how we should stand up for our King Messiah, right? If the pressure comes, we will not fold. Even if we are persecuted, even if we are treated like Jeremiah is treated, right? Our Messiah says that in this life you will have trouble. Our Messiah promised that trouble would come if we are going to stand up for him and his righteousness and his kingdom that is coming. Jeremiah is an example of how we should stand firm regardless of circumstance. Deep in Word family, that's all that I have for you today. Until tomorrow, Yah bless.